Thanks. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Joey. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yay.
Okay, we can't hear you yet, but we'll get that going.
Okay. Let me know if you can.
Hey, Joey, could you try speaking?
Yes, how I'm speaking now. Can you hear?
Okay, we can't hear you yet. One sec.
Okay. Let me know. I signed in early this time.
Oh, that's Aaron's. Yeah. Yeah, I have 46 Waltham. Try it. Hey, Joey, can you try again?
Uh-huh. I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Okay, we're not hearing you. One moment.
All right. Should I do something at this end? Alan, I can hear them, but they're having trouble hearing me. And they're trying to fix it. So is it their problem, you think? It looks like all our things are on.
We can hear you now, Joy.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Faster waiting.
Pretty close to it. There we go. So after months of laboring in their garage, there's two gentlemen named Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak decided to, on this date, incorporate a company called Apple. And the world has never, 1977, the world has never been the same since. Welcome everyone to the January 3rd, 2024 regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. My name is Doug Edmondson. I am chair of the HPC for the time being. And the HPC is made up of volunteers that our mission is to oversee and be stewards to the historic preservation of the city of Manitou Springs, wonderful homes and buildings, so on and so forth. I'll go ahead and start on my left for introductions.
Susan Presti, Vice Chair.
Laura Kenseth, Commissioner.
Ann Nichols, Commissioner.
And Joy Porter, Commissioner.
Joining us via Zoom.
Yes.
Okay, since we have an official call to order, we are going to be looking at approval of minutes for the November 1st, 2023 meeting. Start with that. Are there any corrections or amendments anyone would like to make to those minutes?
I have a correction. On page 6, the vote note on a motion that I made needs correcting. It says motion approved the application. The motion was passed 4-1, but that motion denied the application. So it should read motion was passed 4-1. That's the
Very
only
good.
correction I had.
And Doug, I have 3 corrections.
Okay, very good.
The first one, and I'm using the page numbers at the bottom of the packet, the 46 page, and the first one is page 5 for November 11th. And it's about third from the bottom where it's said she stated interested. It should state just interest. Okay.
Okay,
And then on page 9 of 46, it was confusing, the sentence that has subdivide in it. It's about, I don't know, maybe halfway down. It should really read subdivide semicolon, it would. The way it's written with but and that, it doesn't make as much sense.
got a nod from staff on that one.
Okay, and then on page 11 of 46, Mrs. Royston should be planner Royston, since it's consistent throughout the document as planner. And that's near the top.
And got a nod from staff on that one too.
And then the last one is the December 8th. It's in 19,
We're
page
not
19 of
We're not
40.
there.
Of
Joy?
40. What?
Joy, we're
Yes.
not there. We're
Oh,
still doing.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so are there any more corrections to the November 1st, 2023 minutes?
No.
Do I have a motion?
I'd move approval with the corrections noted.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Item 2, December 6th, 2023 minutes. Corrections or any other amendments?
I have just one. It's on page 19 of 46.
Okay,
And it's near the very start of the page, near the top. It should say the permissions are to the commission, not top the commission.
very good.
And that's all I have.
I have under other business, item 6 in the 5th paragraph, where it says Commissioner Nichols stated that the code covers now and an appeal can happen. And then it went on to say Kinseth clarified about 3 times So that should be Nichols clarified.
Very good. Okay, any other corrections? None? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the December 6, 2023 minutes.
I move to accept the December 6th of 2023 minutes
As corrected.
as corrected.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Do we have any council action?
Thank you, Chair Edmondson. We do not have any council action to report tonight.
Thank you very much. Unfinished business.
We don't have any unfinished business either.
Very good. We'll move into our applications, new business, item 3, MCAC 2327, material change of appearance certification for 46 Waltham Avenue. Are there any commissioners that have any ex parte communication or reasons to recuse themselves?
No.
Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and hear staff report on MCAC 2327.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ethan Schaefer. I'm a newer planner two here in the department, and I will be presenting our presentation for 46 Waltham Avenue. And I'll be fielding any questions about the staff report as well. Let me go ahead and get this presenting here. Perfect. So we received a material change of appearance certification application for 46 Waltham Avenue. Here you can see kind of a site plan of where 46 Waltham Avenue is located. The zone district is going to be our general residential zone district. Lot size 11,297.98 square feet. And this is located within the Ruxton Historic Subdistrict. The request is to replace 3 wood-framed windows with 3 vinyl frame windows. The replacement windows are of the same size, single hung window design, color, and location. The applicant is reusing the existing window trim as well. Here is a before and after. You can see the image from 2017. This is from a Google Street View, and the image as of today in 2024. Some context for this application. We had received a code enforcement inquiry for this property as they were replacing their windows. And our code enforcement officer went out there in late November, and my staff report it outlines that, but went out there and put a stop work order and had them reach out to the planning department, in which the applicants did, met with me, myself, and Chelsea Royston, our senior planner, in which we identified the need for a material change of appearance certification. So that's why we're here today as well with the application. And so you can see windows 1 and 2 in these images as in 2017 and as of today. You can also see post replacement of the 2 northeast windows. You can see window 1 and 2 again, as well as kind of a zoomed in version of both of those windows. The southeast facing window is identified as window 3 here as well, with a zoomed in version. Here's the window cut sheet outlining the type of window, size, so on and so forth. And then here's the motion language for the application. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Okay, very good, Joy. Thank you very much.
On the one window, I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2, but it's on the right side of the picture. It looks like there isn't a wood border on it. Was that taken off, or doesn't look like?
Talking about window 2.
I think it's 2. Yes, that one. I guess on my picture, it doesn't show the wood around it, but it must be there then.
Yes, so in the packet, the photos that are in the packet were taken as the project was occurring prior to submittal. The
Okay.
photos in the presentation are the most up-to-date, utilizing the prior window framing.
All right, thank you. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Other commissioners, any questions for staff? Okay, and I do have one quick question. So I did go by and look at this. It appears that the trim wood hasn't been put back up yet. This has still been stop order in place, correct?
So
Stop work order
the
in
window
place.
trim is up as of today. I did
Oh, it is.
confirm.
The trim's up already. Okay,
Yep.
all right. Well, very good. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and ask the applicant if they are present to come forward, introduce themselves. Please give your full name and current address. And press the little button in the center. You'll see a green light come on. There you are. Voila.
Good evening, all. Doug Hammond, 46 Waltham Ave, in beautiful Manitou Springs.
Do you have anything to add to staff's reports for this application?
Oh, first of all, just only to apologize that we actually initiated somewhat in a non-organized fashion when this first started happening. So I apologize. We just were not aware. Only in town for 3 years. Would have certainly followed the appropriate procedures as we now understand them. So just want to make that official apology. And really, the whole point of this was to improve the efficiency of the house. When we bought it 3 years ago, 3.5 years or so ago, it was like, oh, we're going to have to replace those at some point. It's a drafty, cottage. And that was the initiative.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. What options did you look at for improving the efficiency of these windows besides replacing? What other options did you consider?
In terms of the types of windows,
Types of weatherization and yes,
additional weatherization for efficiency.
something other than replacing the window. Did you look
Oh.
at other options? Storm
did.
windows
We-
and things?
And to be honest, it was a fairly spontaneous decision. We had our handyman in the house who was doing some low flow replacement toilets from that environmental impact. And he said, I could do that. I've got some time. And so he did look at the installation, sort of opportunities, but we trusted his judgment at that point to say, the biggest improvement, most cost effective that you could do initially would be to replace those windows.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioners, any other questions? I'd like to make a statement to you, Mr. Hammond.
Sure.
One of the things that our commission does is try to be open-minded to the seems to be now great wave of window replacements that's happening around the country in the name of efficiency. And we normally try to stay open-minded to this if the windows are replaced in kind. And what that means is either if they're divided or if they're double hung. What this is, the one window that is on your northwest elevation was actually what's called a cottage style, which had about a 40-60 reveal. It means the upper window was smaller and the lower window was larger. It's the opposite of an oriel window, where it's usually used in bay windows where the lower part of the window is smaller. And with this, we normally would look at that. If you're going to replace a window, we'd like for you to replace it in something that in the modern that mimics the original window that was in place of the old window. Just FYI.
Thank you.
And that's an actual true terminology. It's a cottage style window. It's called a 40-60. So with that said, I'm going to move to staff to see if there's anyone in the audience or anyone in attendance that has any comments at this time for public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Edmondson. There is nobody online.
Okay, no hands online. And do we have anyone in the audience that would like to make comment on this particular application? Okay, very good. Mr. Hammond, thank you. I'll go ahead and ask you to take your seat and we will have a discussion amongst the commissioners about your application. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do I have any questions, comments, or input from the commissioners?
I do have a comment, Doug.
Yeah.
And maybe this is for planning, but as we look at updating our code, I really think we need to look at our window code to see, because we seem to end up here a lot where either windows through no fault of the homeowner starts to replace and we don't get to give input on the kind or how it's replaced or if it can be refurbished, and we have funds for that, some, funds that people can access. I think we need to really look at how we can make it more known to the community so we don't lose more style of windows in historic designated places. That's my only comment.
Other comments from commissioners?
Well, I understand it that those were not original windows that were being replaced. They were also somewhere down the line vinyl windows. So that were only single pane. And they wanted to replace them with double pane. So they're basically replacing vinyl with vinyl.
That would be news to me.
That was not my understanding from
That's
what
not
the
my
write-up,
understanding. I was, yeah.
because it was
I
wood.
Went by, yeah, they were wood, yeah. Yeah, they were wood and they were blown glass, so,
They were.
yeah.
Yes.
Those
Oh,
that's particularly the one I pointed out was original to the building. It's a 1906 build, typical cottage style.
Oh.
Yeah.
oh.
It's all right, no problem.
Misunderstood. that.
Yeah.
They were-
I think possibly the windows on the upper level might have been replaced already,
Yeah.
but those lower level windows were obviously not single hung. They were the 60/40. It was very obvious that they were a different design and style. And this is a contributing structure. And according to the standards, national standards, that replacing a distinctive feature, and those windows are very distinctive in their design. The new feature will match that, and these do not. So this really is a difficult situation because this is a historical structure, and the windows should match in proportion what was there previously, even though the glass can change, but the proportion is really important in that design. So and there are other options for improving your, which is why I asked the question. There are other options for improving the efficiency of your windows. There are inserts that are pretty much invisible, or it can be done on the interior that would make it more energy efficient. So it's not the only option to replace the windows. It's sometimes the easiest, but obviously has significantly changed the historic character of the house. So it's an element that, because they're already done, I'm not quite sure. It puts us in a difficult position. I would not have approved this request if I'd come before me ahead of time. I would say that these windows need to match the previous design. And I'm sure they would make a window out there. Somebody would custom make a window that would match the proportion. So at least it looks the same. So this is, I'm at a odds of where to go with this. I would have to deny this MCAC.
Okay,
Uh,
Commissioner Nichols?
Yeah, and I would
based
just
on this.
point out that we deal with this on a pretty regular basis and have been not able, despite what Commissioner Porter would hope for, have not been able to get that information disseminated in advance. So we have, I think, on many, many circumstances, approved after the fact, because it is a difficult situation to be in. So I think that's the position we're in. And if I could read the number of the MCAC, I would move for its approval as presented. But my
Commissioner
eyesight's not
Porter,
good.
any other comments?
It's always hard for me when, and this isn't not trying to be negative towards the applicant, because I'm not, but it's always hard for me after the fact to approve it. It's almost like in my mind sometimes that people, for whatever reason, go ahead and change something that's historically significant and then come, and it's really to make them replace the windows and redo all that work. In most circumstances, we don't do that, since we have other MCACs that are in this category where people go ahead and then we're sort of catch up. It's hard for me then to vote, because it makes it seem like what we do is if you go ahead and change something and come to us, we are in a dilemma and we'll probably approve it because we're caught in between the applicant and efficiency and the historic guidelines. It's one of those most awkward votes. I have a tendency not to vote for approval, to at least have some kind of record that that it wasn't unanimous. But at the same time, you know, I'm torn about them not being able to move forward since it's obvious they already have. And it's, you know, again, it's not wanting to be negative towards the applicant. It's our process that we end up caught in these. And sometimes we say you have to redo it. But a lot of times we are caught. That's my comment.
No, I apologize for misunderstanding that. I must be losing my marbles.
No, it's
or
okay.
something.
Uh,
But I totally agree with you, Susan. There are, if it was an original window, a restored or repaired original wood window will give you the same kind of energy efficiency that a new window will. So,
Any other comments?
And I would merely repeat what I've said before. We have a long-standing, I think, practice of, even though it's uncomfortable and awkward, the work is done, it's relatively close to what the original looked like, and we approve them. And I will reassess or reiterate that I am moving to approve MCAC, whatever the number is. That's it.
Anyone want to second that?
Doug, where are you in this?
Well, since the barn is alight and the door is closed and the horse is down the road,
Uh-huh.
you do. I mean, if the least I would have done for this particular situation is I would have asked the one cottage style window to be either replicated in kind. I mean,
Okay.
obviously trying to restore old windows is a niche, you know, skill that I know all too much about. But, you know, I mean, what can we do here? This isn't permitted work. It's not going to hold up anything else with the construction of the building. It's never going to be reviewed by the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department. So, you know, approving it is just sort of a nod yay or nay to the activity itself. Greetings, Counselor Weatherholt. How are you this evening? Fantastic. So, I mean, Commissioner Nichols has put a motion on the floor. I'm just going to look at approval. But I think that the applicant has heard our position, and hopefully he will carry that with him and share it with his neighbors, and others will hear our message that this isn't cool, for lack of better references. So.
I would, with protest, second Commissioner Nichols' motion, knowing that owning a historic house in Manitou Springs brings responsibilities. And that includes making sure you check into things before work is done, at least on the exterior of the house, for sure. That is a responsibility of homeowners in our community. If they own historic contributing buildings, that's why we love to own homes here, but it carries a great responsibility with it, that we maintain that historic character, because that's why we live here. And so I would second it. I will say, I would not, at the end of the year, when we look at things that are conform to our approval process, this is not one that would qualify for me. Just keep in mind.
Well, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous, and thank you, sir.
No, Doug, I would vote nay.
Okay, we have Commissioner Porter rescinding.
Saying
you.
no. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I would have personally liked to have had the glass, because I break windows on my property occasionally, and that old blown glass is very hard to find. So I cut my own glass and replace my own windows. I'm a little crazy, trust me. Sir, have a good evening. Okay, item 4, MCAC 2328, material change of appearance certification at 805 Shoshone Place. Are any of the commissioners in ex parte communication or otherwise need to recuse themselves from this particular application?
No.
Good. Staff will go ahead and hear your report.
Thank you. Erin Ringsred for the record, planner and landscape architect 2 for the city of Manitou Springs. I'm presenting MCAC 2328 at 805 Shoshone Place. Michael Lopez is the owner and I am presenting the project. The request is for replacement of a front door and the addition of a condenser unit to the southwest side of the structure, addressed as 805 Shoshone. The property is located in the High Road Historic Subdistrict. For a little context or background, this commission heard applications for the building highlighted here in red earlier this year for a porch and a door replacement and some window adjustments as well. The structure highlighted in yellow is the structure under discussion this evening. I'm not sure this is the site plan. I'm giving you a more detailed look of what that structure is. So there are 4 structures total on this one parcel, they've got some different addresses associated with them in terms of record. So this is a picture of the structure as it exists today. The new front door has been installed already, as has the AC unit on the side of the structure there. The AC unit has limited visibility from the road, but still visibility from the road, which is why it is being heard this evening. This was the existing front door prior to the replacement, and this is the proposed and installed front door as well as the proposed unit. The front door, as shown here, was also that same model was installed as part of the building previously highlighted in red that was heard earlier this year. These are considered contributing structures to the High Road Historic Subdistrict, and the code reflects that in terms of the code that we are showing. There is, we'll say, similar proportions in terms of the door, and does not result in a significant sort of change of orientation to the roadway or a changing of the opening. It is just a door replacement. And the motions, should the commission decide to approve, staff has no conditions. And with that, that completes staff's report.
I just have a clarification question. On the staff recommendations on mine, it says that the condensing unit is screened from view.
I apologize. That was added later and I just forgot to mention it. The condition of staff is that the proposed condensing unit is screened from view as recommended in the historic district guidelines. So that would be an addition that would be added to what is currently out there today so that it's not as visible from the roadway.
And just one other question, does the planning department, do we have recommendations for screens so that the applicant would know what kind would work there, or do they just go find a screen of some kind?
Thank you, Commissioner Porter. For the record, Hannah Van Nimwegen. The Historic District Guidelines does not specify a desired screen type, but the figure shows something similar to like a cedar fence. But there is nothing specifically outlined as being preferred over another version of a screen.
All right, thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff? No. I would only say one thing, that if there was ever a screen recommended for an apparatus like a condensing unit for air conditioning, that it be lattice work on a bias, that therefore it won't disrupt the performance of the appliance. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and ask the applicant to come up and introduce yourself, sir, with your full name and your current address.
Hi, everyone. It's Michael Lopez. Current address is 3715 Glen Meadow Drive, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80906.
Mr. Lopez, do you have anything to add to your application or staff's report?
Other than that, I know originally we were looking at making improvements on the windows, but we were actually able to restore them, fix them and keep them original. We had to fix like the weights, the counterbalance weights and all that stuff, but we were able to fix those and maintain those. And apologize that we jumped the gun on, my guys kind of jumped the gun on the door, thinking that since it was the same as the other one would be fine. And then the condenser as well, it's also the heat pump. And that was the only source of heat. So we started it. It can be moved if it needs to be. All the stuff can be corrected according to your guys' suggestions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, obviously the pump, that's probably the optimal location for the condenser, correct, for the system?
It is.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I thought. And did you investigate repairing the door? The application said it was that the lock mechanism wasn't working well, probably the doorknob. Did you pursue repair rather than replacement options?
I did. It was actually the frame, I guess the door jamb, you'd say, that was messed up from the inside. And I didn't get like I guess someone that's good at millwork or whatnot to come in and see if that could be restored or replaced. Went with the simpler route. So I do apologize on that one. I did not pursue the repairs as I did with the windows.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I just would say, thank you for repairing the windows rather than replacing them. That's a positive thing.
Of
Thank you.
course.
Yes, ditto on that. And was the door that you removed the original door?
Potentially. I can't say for sure. It was a wood door. And it seemed like it's been there for a while. It was beat up and it was repainted several times. You can't really see it from the picture, but if you look at it pretty closely, you can just tell that it had multiple layers and I don't know, it wasn't smooth, and then the jam was probably just the biggest concern.
Thanks.
Any other questions from commissioners? Any other statements? Okay. Thank you, sir, for coming up. I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment. Is there anybody in the audience, anybody in attendance via Zoom that has any questions for the applicant?
We do not have anyone online.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close public comments. Commissioners, there any other comments? Anyone want to say anything about this particular application?
Yes, please. Mr. Lopez,
Mhm.
I appreciate that you saved the windows. Absolutely. I am disappointed. You have done this work before. You do know you need to come to us before this work. I don't know that you should have skipped this step, having had to bring your last project to us. So I hope you have learned this time that you have to come to us first for MCAC. And I am disappointed in the choice of not repairing the door. That is a very distinctive style of door that is consistent with multiple structures in your block there. And it's very hard I mean, I couldn't find online a replacement of that style. So it's very historic, whether it's original or not. It's historic and it's consistent with what the rest of the block is. So I know we allowed you to do it around the corner, but I'm disappointed that you were not willing to pursue more investigation to repair that door and keep the old door. That's just my statement, but thank you.
Got it.
Commissioner Porter?
You know, the door they're putting in looks like a nice door and looks new and bright. But again, I agree with Susan. It's the original door to just investigate to see if it could be replaced or not replaced, but refurbished and changed and fixed so that it matches in the neighborhood. To me, would have been the better path for the door. It seems like it is easier to just replace old things, but to refurbish them and keep us historic is so important to all of us, since we chose, you choose to live in a historic district, and you know that there could be guidelines when you purchase a house. The windows are good, that they were refurbished, but it seems like, knowing that, you would also look at the door, because a refurbished door could fit very nicely there rather than the more modern one.
Right, and I apologize, I don't know if I could speak. But just in regards to the door, we, like, personally, we did take a look at it, even when we had investigated the windows, and that's why when we took off the trim from the inside, saw that we could repair by replacing some pulleys and replacing the rope and things like that. On the door, on the jamb itself, it was already pretty broken and cracked and whatnot, and then because of the constant damage of it on the actual door, even me personally, just thinking you can't, me not knowing, I don't know if you can add wood and then sand it and then attach it or whatnot, but that's more or less what we would have to look at so that we can fill the gap and the door would be functional. So it was a judgment call. It wasn't just gonna get rid of this and put in a new one. If that does anything.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and call for a motion. I'd like to state, Vice Chair Presti, thank you very much for being a sounding board for my feelings on this particular application. I don't really dig this being second time you're up here asking for forgiveness instead of doing what you're supposed to do. And look up what's called a Dutch miter or a Dutch repair. Okay, go online and look it up. It's pretty easy to do, and I've repaired a lot of doors doing that.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Move for approval of, I believe, MCAC 2328 as proposed with staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I'd second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to vote nay again.
Order rescinding. Thank you very much. Good evening, sir. Have a good night. And we are going to go ahead and close our new business application section and move into other business where I get to look for a new job. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really looking forward to giving someone else to have a chance of being chair. I've done this for 2 years. It's been interesting. It's been a giant learning curve for me, but I think it's going to be fun to see somebody else up here doing this for a while. So item 5, annual board elections.
Well, Doug, I'd like to say that I've really enjoyed the way you've led the meetings the last 2 years and all the information that you share. It has made our meetings very calm and collaborative, and just wanted to compliment you on that.
No, I appreciate that, Commissioner Porter. I do enjoy doing this.
So I will move for nomination of Commissioner Presti as chair. Should we do them one at a time or both?
Yeah, one at a
One at a
time.
time. Okay.
Anyone want to second that motion?
I would second it.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Chair Presti. Okay, very good. We move to the nomination of vice chair for the Historic Preservation Commission.
I would nominate Laura.
I'll second that.
We have a nomination of Laura Consith as vice chair for the Historic Preservation Commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Congratulations.
Well, thanks.
Thank
I'll
you.
wear my
Thank you.
thinking cap next time.
Now we go into I will go ahead and finish off the meeting prior to this. In item 6, legal training. I never have liked the sound of that, but we'll go ahead and listen to it anyways.
Thank you, Chair Edmondson. We have a presentation by our city attorney, Katie Vera. She is in person today, but I know you've seen her via Zoom. And I'll get that shared and then turn it over to her.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you in person. I know I'm usually just a face on a screen, so it's nice to come down in person, and it's beautiful here, so I do enjoy visiting. Alrighty, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Historic Preservation Commission's duties and roles, how it fits in with the municipal code, talk a little bit about open meetings law, and just feel free to butt in if you have any questions. Again, my name is Katie Vera. I work for a firm called Hoffman, Parker, Wilson, and Carberry. We're based in Denver. Jeff Parker, a partner at my firm, is the overarching city attorney for Manitou Springs, and he's worked with Manitou Springs for some time. So if you guys have any questions, throughout the presentation, just feel free to ask them, and we'll just deal with them as they come up. If you want to go to the next slide, Hannah. So again, this is just a brief overview of the topics that we'll discuss today. If you feel like you need a refresher on any one of them in a little more detail, just let me know. So I think you all are aware of the purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission. You are charged with reviewing plans for building in the historic district for architectural appropriateness and to ensure that the proposals meet the city's design guidelines, which are based on the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And on the next slide, I've outlined just like some of the duties that are in the code. And on the following slide, I've got a little more in depth on those duties. There's a whole list. If you haven't looked at them yet, I'm sure you have, but again, they're in the code. There's a lot of different duties and powers that the Historic Preservation Commission has. I know that you're not charged with exercising those at every meeting, but it is useful to look at those because there are, a variety of things that the Historic Preservation Commission does have the power to do that you may not have considered before. So again, I've provided a little bit of an overview here. Actually, if you want to go back, Hannah. Again, reviewing and approving MCACs, that's basically every meeting. You're pretty familiar with that. Making recommendations to City Council regarding demolition of certain resources. That happens from time to time. Reviewing and making recommendations to City Council regarding designation of historic districts. Implementing public awareness and incentive programs to promote historic preservation. That came up tonight. I know there's ongoing efforts on that. Making recommendations to City Council regarding the historic preservation elements of the city's vision plan, and then taking steps to encourage or bring about preservation of resources. So in the next slide, this slide here, we've got some general considerations for you as a commission. As a commission, you do act as a body. No single member has the authority to act on behalf of the commission on his or her own volition, unless specifically delegated that authority. You also speak as a body. I think that's really important when you're speaking to the public, or if anybody has any questions, just to kind of speak as that body. The commission decided to do this, or the commission voted that way. I mean, you can feel free to note maybe your disagreement or your personal perspective, but I think it's important to have the integrity and have the unity of speaking as a body. Again, a couple other points here: no authority to spend city funds unless you have the express City Council approval. That's something that's done in conjunction with the budget, talking about how the Historic Preservation Commission wants to spend their funds. No authority to direct or supervise city staff. City staff works with boards and commissions, but they're not subject to their control. So if you did have an issue, you might want to speak to the city manager. Any issues that need to be addressed with the supervisor of the applicable employee, and just want to respect those boundaries there. Any legal advice that's provided to the commission is confidential and cannot be disclosed to third parties. If you do have any questions, you can always feel free to email me. I have a card, I'll give it out to you. And you have no authority to bind the city legally or contractually, and you're not a separate legal entity apart from the city. You're working within the city to fulfill your duties and obligations. And the Historic Preservation Commission is kind of fun because you do have a few different hats that you wear. You're mostly acting as a quasi-judicial body when you're making recommendations to City Council for approvals of MCACs or for demolition of structures or designations. But you do wear a few different hats: quasi-judicial, legislative, and administrative. Those hats are a little bit different. There's a lot of due process involved with quasi-judicial actions. Due process is triggered. There's a notice and a hearing. You know, you participate in that pretty much every meeting, so you're pretty familiar with that. But in your quasi-judicial role, you should make sure that you're applying the criteria that you have to the evidence that's presented at the public hearing. The Historic Preservation Commission does have in their charge that they visit different buildings or structures when you're considering applications. So there's that, but you do have to be wary of ex parte communications with applicants and with anything that's coming before you as a body. Of course, you must be fair and impartial, and not act with any bias, and any of your actions are ultimately subject to judicial review. You make recommendations to City Council and they act on that, but the entire process can be subject to judicial review if there's any kind of appearance of some giant glaring conflict or a failure to apply the appropriate criteria. Next, we have a brief discussion about open records. So as a commission, you are subject to the Colorado Open Records Act. Under the CORA, what's called CORA, public records must be open to public inspection. It includes all writings made, maintained, or kept by a public body. It also includes emails. So that's why when you receive emails, sometimes from Hannah or from Aaron or from Ethan, the entire commission might be BCC'd, but we encourage you not to reply all. Whenever you're speaking about public business, it should be done in a public forum at your meetings and not through email. Ultimately, if there were some discussions that occurred via an email chain, they could be discoverable and they could be subject to public inspection and public disclosure. So that's something to definitely be aware of. Similarly, open meetings require proper notice. Meetings of a quorum or of 3 or more members may only be held after at least 24 hours notice and must be open to the public. I'm sure you're well aware of that. Adding new agenda items with less than 24-hour notice could violate open meetings law. So you have to provide as much agenda information as possible within that 24-hour window. And again, emails of officials could constitute a meeting when you're discussing pending legislation or other public business.
Question.
Yeah,
We're
go ahead.
not, we're not elected officials.
Right. You're not elected officials. Thank you. That's a good point. You're not elected officials. However, we do feel that even as a commission, you are subject to CORA and to open meetings law. So it still applies to you despite not actually being an elected official, despite being appointed.
And question,
Yes.
What if there is a violation of the opens meeting law? Let's say 3 or more people were to meet and there not be any sort of public notification, what would be the ramifications of that?
So you might get sued. You might get sued into district court, and myself or Jeff would represent you. You know, we would try to there might not be any real ramification other than just disclosure of what happened at that open meeting, but there are some consequences. Lawsuits are expensive. It's expensive to defend the city, and there could be some ramifications with the city's insurers as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, but if there was any recording of that meeting, you might have to disclose what was discussed. So that's really the ramification there.
Can I add, if there was in this instance where 3 or more commissioners wanted to get together, even just for lunch or something like that, just email our department and we'll post it appropriately from there. Just give me 24 hours notice.
Yeah, that's a good point, Hannah. Thank you. So executive sessions, this doesn't really come up much with this commission, but if you did have any kind of negotiation, I don't know if that would ever come up. There's different reasons for a body to enter into executive session. Again, I don't think that really comes up here. Purchase of sale or property, conferences with an attorney for legal advice. If there was some kind of glaring legal issue and you did want to meet with me in person and have an executive session, we would notice that executive session and lawfully enter into the executive session, and we could all speak in private if needed. I don't see where that would come up, but if you do have a question about that or feel like there's some need for it, you can definitely email me and we'll make sure that we notice it properly and that everything is done correctly. Then conflicts of interest. I know that there's some questions about this. So this is governed by Amendment 41 of the Colorado Constitution, the Colorado Code of Ethics, and then also by the Manitou Springs Municipal Code. Generally speaking, there's 2 situations that are outlined in the code for which you are required to recuse. It's if there's an act that's going to affect your economic interest or a family member's interest, if there's really something that you're approving or considering that you have some kind of real personal tie to, and you really feel that you cannot act in an impartial way or without any bias, that's an instance in which you should recuse yourself. The steps to avoid violation of conflict of interest are to disclose the interest, if necessary, recuse yourself and leave the room, and then to not influence the decision-making in any way. Ultimately, if there is an appearance of a conflict, you should consider recusing. Recusal is really up to every single individual member. But we do recommend that whenever you feel I need to explain this, or I need to actually just bring this up, you should. If you want to say, hey, this wasn't really an ex parte communication, or hey, I don't really think this is a conflict, but this is my, personal tie to this application or to this person, you should disclose it. Unless it's a family member or somebody that's very close to you and there is some kind of financial interest that's going on, recusal isn't mandatory. I know it comes up case by case, so if you have any questions or if something's coming up ahead of time and you want to ask us, just let us know. And I guess I'll just take some time during this section to address the city council liaison that we have here. Hi, I'm not sure that I know your name. Michelle Weatherhall. Yeah, great. So I know there was a question about the liaison. As you know, these MCACs, when you're recommending approval, it does go to city council. When city council is considering those and approving those, they are acting in a quasi judicial sorry, did I misspeak?
I don't believe that all of our MCACs make it to council. I think only larger.
Only demolition, I think,
Okay.
unless it's appealed, right?
To clarify, all MCACs may be appealed, which then would be heard by the city council, but they're like demolitions and other applications that are less frequent do go to city council.
Right.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so there are some MCACs which could be later heard or appealed to city council, in which city council then would review. So I think there's definitely some meetings where we can review the agenda. It's appropriate for the city council liaison to sit in. If you'd like the city council liaison to sit in, there's not an issue with that. There's definitely some meetings where there's not as heavy of an agenda, or where we do have very kind of smaller MCACs like tonight, probably not going to be appealed. So I think those are appropriate instances in which the city council liaison can attend. Again, if you have a question about a specific agenda, and you want us to look into whether it's appropriate for the city council liaison to attend, we can look into that. Ultimately, if the city council liaison did sit in on an MCAC that was appealed to city council, she should probably recuse herself and abstain from voting on that item, just because she had already considered it, had heard the discussion here, and, you know, had some kind of prejudicial, we'll call it, consideration of the item. Obviously, usually if something would be appealed to city council, they wouldn't have that entire record, that entire discussion. They wouldn't hear that entire exchange. They'd have sort of a clean record of what happened. So in that instance, the city council liaison would be asked to recuse themselves.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I had heard on another issue that we had around this, about the city council member attending, is that Jeff had said that he would recommend against it just for all the reasons that you said, not that we don't like Michelle, but that it could sort of
Right.
jump up a decision.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to contradict anything he said. I think out of an abundance of caution and to be super conservative, that probably would be the best approach. But again, if there's a couple of meetings that are identified at which that really isn't as much of a concern, then I think you should welcome the city council liaison to attend if you'd like.
I'd
Thank
like to add a little something to that. So I think that it's pretty obvious that if our liaison, and thank you again for attending, it's nice to see you here, were to previously review the agenda prior to the meeting and see that like something like Hiawatha Gardens or Carnegie Library, something of that nature, that's
Right.
definitely going to be before council, that they would choose not to come to that meeting. As we all know, you know, who may sue you or appeal can be a roll of the dice. It can be very erratic and
Mhm.
very just out of the blue, how people may behave if you turn down their application, which is very rare for us. Very rare for us to turn down an application. We've only had a couple of appeals on people who, as you were privileged to see this evening, have commenced work or executed work prior to there being approval.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So the last slide is just about governmental immunity and personal liability. Boards and members have immunity under the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act unless you're acting willfully or wantonly. Individual members who are acting outside the scope of their authority. Again, there could be some implications with your insurance defense coverage and your liability coverage. Really, this would only apply if you went far outside the scope of your authority. I don't think that there's any concern here with this group of that happening. But again, when you're considering applications and when you're reviewing, you should always tie back to the design guidelines. Staff is great about including that language and kind of outlining that for the commission. So again, I don't have any big glaring concerns that you would ever run into this, but it is something to be aware of. And are there any other questions? I think one other question was about a quorum. A quorum of the commission is 3 members.
Thank you. We see somehow when Michelle was here, she had the impression that 4 was a quorum, no matter what. And so we went back and forth a number of times. And I think it got a little confused the last month, but I think it's good to clarify that there's 5 of us, or only 5 that are seated as commissioners. So a quorum is.
Yeah,
3.
my impression, my understanding of a quorum is 50% or more of the standing commissioners, less vacancies. So if there's regularly 7, but we only have 5, then a quorum would be 3.
Correct. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Good.
Joy, any questions?
No, very clear.
Okay, I have one.
Yes.
Since you were present and seeing some of the problematic cases that we have sometimes. And this is, and I'm going to push for this even as a commissioner, even though I'm stepping down as chair after this evening, is there room for there to be some sort of penalties/fine for either first-time offenders for not doing an MCAC where it was appropriate, or particularly as we saw a person who, this is the second time they have ignored the application process and are before us and have already replaced a door that was historic, so on and so forth. Just a little background. The reason why I'm asking that is I was part of a restoration project here in Manatee Springs dealing with Rainbow Falls that had a dramatic amount of graffiti at it at one time. And we asked the local circuit district court to place an extra fine on people who were caught vandalizing / graffitiing that area, and that money was set aside in a special fund. And after 1 year, they actually were able to buy a sandblasting machine that would actually take care of the graffiti. And so I would like to go to staff at some point and ask for possibly a fine structure for those who decide to go ahead and just execute work, are handed a stop work order, ignore it, or do things that they know that they should be doing, particularly in the case you saw this evening, someone being their second round in front of us that are up here asking for forgiveness, window, doors already at the bottom of the dump somewhere, you know, and they just walk out of here not even with a slap on the hand.
Right.
You know, they just, they might walk through that door again for a third or fourth time. So if they're getting hit with a $250 fine or a $500 fine,
Right.
and that can go to either grants for people who actually behave themselves and do applications. We can enhance our grant program or put that money towards our awards program. It's
Yeah.
just a suggestion.
Yeah, so I guess first I would just ask maybe Hannah, have you ever had any penalties enforced? And I'm looking at the penalty provision, and sorry, so I'm not ignoring you.
No,
I've got my laptop up, I got the code up, so I'm looking at the penalty provision and I'm looking at some of the overview. I think I could maybe send an email to the commission that outlined those penalties a little bit more, in a little bit more detail for you for future consideration. I would say that with some of the MCACs, there's also a consideration of the hardships of the applicant, of course. So
Right.
I
That's
think
always
that
taken
in
into
some of those
consideration.
cases, you might want to ask, you know, what is the cost of, for example, with the door, what would be the cost of repairing the door? And then what would be the cost of the door that he had already bought? And then kind of tying that into what a possible penalty could be. Just kind of considering all the facts there. So there might be some situations in which you'd have to continue just to get a little more information from the applicant. But I don't think that it's outside of the realm of possibility for there to be some penalties for this.
Can I ask a question of Anne?
That was a long answer.
Great answer.
Can I ask Anne a question?
Sure, yeah.
And what, I assume that maybe some of this was discussed when we were forming the different districts and sub-districts. Was it ever discussed about penalties? I go both ways. I don't like forgiveness, but at the same time, people make mistakes. So was it discussed at all?
No, I'm not aware. Does city code allow penalties? I just have never heard this discussion at all.
So
No,
there are
yeah.
general penalties for violations of provisions of the code. I think that might go through municipal court though. So I'm not sure that you would have a role in recommending the penalties now that I'm thinking it through a little bit more, but I'm not sure, Hannah.
We could, so I'll need to take a look at the code, but I don't recall if Title 17 has its own like penalties section and what it points to, but there are fines associated with code violations in the city's universal fine and fee schedule. And so like our code enforcement officer, when there's an issue, she usually out of courtesy will do a warning because, you know, you don't know what you don't know. But then upon like a second offense, a fee is applied and it continues until it's remediated. And so it could take some looking into to make sure we're setting up the right structure. But there is potential for fines through the adoption of the city fee schedule. But again, we would have to make sure that that aligns with the code enforcement court process too.
Yeah, and the one thing I would question, I mean, for the most part, what we do is based on quote unquote guidelines.
Sure,
not specific code provisions.
sure.
I mean, there's the one case that I'm aware of, which is demolition, which is a very specific code provision. We had an individual that tore down a house without the proper authority, and either in code or somewhere, there was the penalty for that was they could not build on that property for like
10
5
years,
something.
yeah.
But I think for the most part, what we're doing is a bit kind of more general than code. It's applying guidelines, and we have a lot of discretion in applying guidelines. And I view as what we did tonight, basically, as applying guidelines. So I think it would be really hard, although you all should certainly look at it, to provide for penalties, right? Because there aren't strict code provisions. We are given the discretion, given the circumstances, to apply the guidelines, which are basically just that, guidelines, not requirements. So I would be hesitant to go down that road, even though I know Doug was
Hey,
very
you know,
frustrated.
I got slapped with a stop work order one time, and by the time I was finished riding my ship, it had 5 zeros behind it. It cost me
I guess
could
I
achieve that
agree.
without penalties. If we deny the MCAC, which is within our purview, then they cannot continue work until they meet our requirements. So that is the penalty. If we choose to say, we don't accept this, something you've already installed, it does not, we won't approve the MCAC. There is a cost to that because they will have to come back.
I'm not talking about the window situation. I'm talking about the fella who's been in front of us for a second time now. You know, and no, I don't buy it. You could have repaired the door for a lot less than it costs to go out and buy that door. I can guarantee you.
You know, I would really rather have us, and I think there's a lot of room for us to do more education in terms of showing our community what can be done, what shouldn't be done without first approaching planning. I think when I first started on the HPC, we had a more robust, I think, educational effort. And I think that would be the first step I would recommend, is that we start back with something like monthly newsletters to the Pikes Peak Bulletin that addresses some specific issue that we're having issues with, like windows. Because I know that people legitimately don't know,
So
sincerely don't know that they aren't supposed to do windows.
that kind of
without
that kind of letter to the bulletin should be vetted by staff before it's.
Oh, I think staff ought to do it, frankly. But yeah, I mean, I think more education is always the first step. I think penalties and fines are really viewed fairly negatively, whereas if we could educate people as to what they should do in the right sequence, that would be more acceptable to the community, I think.
Well, and Anne, this is Joy. I agree with you about the education and not being punitive. I think when we had the 24 people that were awarded the awards this time, I think that showed that most people are really trying. Some people are ignorant, some people take advantage, but I think that right now we really have a positive perspective from the community about what we do, because we very seldom turn things down, and people really work hard to keep up the contributing buildings in our town. So I get not nervous. I just would be very cautious about fining. Yes, it could feel good to say to the person that's done it 2 or 3 times, but I really think that when they have a stop order and they have to stop, and that they may have to redo something, that is a consequence. I don't want to get into the fining of people unless suddenly everybody in town wanted to change their historic buildings or something. So I agree with Anne on that.
I would just ask us to remember, and some of us may not have been here at that time, but when I first got on the commission in 2003, there was a group that was trying to do away with the historic district. There are a group of people who are fairly negative towards any kind of regulation in terms of telling them what they should be doing. And we have gone out of our way for the last 20 years, I think, to try to turn that around and involve the public and involve some of our detractors in coming up with an approach that is respectful of their property rights, but still maintains the historic integrity of the town. And so I think we just need to be real careful about, as you say, Joey, getting too punitive. I think we need to educate and continue to talk to folks, but I think that's the first step, really.
Yeah, so in looking at the code a little bit more, it looks like there could be an action brought against a property owner for failing to abide by the provisions of Title 17 specifically. That would be initiated in municipal court though. So you would have the code enforcement officer summons the person and it would be handled through that, venue. It wouldn't go through you, and you wouldn't really have the authority to fine anybody. But there are provisions in this penalty section that do contemplate an action being brought to require restoration of structures that are demolished or destroyed in whole or in part if they're deemed a resource. So that does seem to be available under the code.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I have no more further questions. You?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you give us a little more information about ex parte communication definition and what that would involve? Since we ask it every time, I want to make sure, since I'm going to chair, that I'm clear
Sure.
what that is.
Sure. So, say tonight, I think the applicant was Michael Lopez, maybe. An ex parte communication would involve speaking to an applicant directly about their application, the merits of their application, the details of their application outside of this public forum and this public hearing. So if you had any communication specifically about their HPC application or something that was coming before the HPC outside of this meeting.
All right.
May I add one thing?
Yeah.
I'll be very quick. So Ethan was kind enough to remind me that and this isn't just in a historic district, but it definitely applies to properties in the historic district. When work is done prior to planning permission, which is just a blanket term for various approvals, we do charge a higher fee than if they were in appropriately. So typically, the use tax fee would be 3.8% of their cost of materials only. If they did the work without getting that permission first, it actually jumps up to 8%. And that is already in the fee schedule. So that is currently being applied.
And does that go towards lunch? Is that just
We'll have to talk to city council about allocating a line item for HPC lunches.
Very good. Well, folks, I'm going to go ahead and call adjournment of the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission for January 3rd, 2024. It's been a pleasure serving you as chair, and I'm looking forward to our next meeting. I would like to remind folks, since now Chair Pressey has told me this, that she will not be present at the February meeting, and Vice Chair Kinseth, you're going to be leading the next band.
Wow.
Yeah, just like that, man. There it goes.
I will do my best. I will.
And good evening, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Thank you, Katie.
So I do have one other thing. I
Oh.
live in a very old house in Denver. So if you have any tips on restoration or kind of restoring the character of the house, yeah, I think everything maybe.